Okay, so in this recording, I want to talk to you about viruses for just a second. And when you think of a virus, you should probably think of the flu, hepatitis, HIV, just a common cold is called a rhinovirus, polio, measles, herpes, chickenpox. Those things are all viruses. And we treat viruses much different than we do bacteria. And the reason is because of what they're made of. Viruses are much different than bacteria. They are not cells. So a virus is an acellular. And that means it's not a cell. So it's acellular. So they're much smaller than bacteria. So extremely small. They have to live, this is what this is saying, they have to live inside a cell. So they have to live inside a cell. So when you have the flu, the virus gets inside your respiratory cells. Okay, when you have hepatitis, the virus gets inside your liver cells. So the virus doesn't float around in your bloodstream alone like bacteria do. And so think about it. If the virus, let's say this is your cell, if the virus is inside your cell, well, how are we going to kill that? In order to kill the virus, you would have to kill your cell. And if you take a medicine that kills your cell, it's going to be virulent for you. It's going to be harmful to you. And so that's why antivirals are strong medications. They're not given very frequently. If you have a stomach virus, you just wait and let your immune system take over. And your immune system has mechanisms in order to do this. Just a little review from 202. And this is not on your test, but just kind of so you remember and understand. When a virus is inside your cell, and we'll go back to purple here, your cell actually makes a chemical. It releases this chemical that notifies the rest of your body, I'm sick, I'm infected, you need to kill me. And so the white blood cells will actually destroy your cells. And those are called interferons, the chemical that your cell releases. Now, hepatitis patients can actually take interferon. And we'll talk about the specific types of viruses on a later test, but not this one. So these are just general characteristics of viruses. But you want to know that they're obligated to be intra the cell, inside another cell. So they must have a living host. And they are not cells, right? They are not cells. Okay, so viruses are really simple. First, before we start this slide, know that viruses are specific. Okay, if I have a respiratory virus and we drink after each other, then you're going to get a respiratory virus. You're not going to get hepatitis, or you're not going to get polio, or chickenpox, or whatever. Viruses are very specific in the host that they infect, and so that's why hepatitis or hepatitis C specifically, you only get through blood. So I could drink after someone who has hepatitis, and I'm not going to get it because the virus has to get to my liver in order to infect me. They're not only specific in the host, but they're specific in the location of the host. So, what makes me sick is not going to make another animal sick, like a dog or something. So viruses are very specific. And they either have DNA or RNA inside them. Okay, and then the virus has a capsid. Okay, so here's your virus. And it's either got DNA or RNA, but not both. Okay, and just as a, kind of a thought, RNA is not very stable. It's single-stranded, where DNA I know you've seen it on movies or something in previous science classes. DNA is like a ladder, twisted. Well, RNA is just half of that ladder. And so, because RNA is less stable, it mutates faster, it evolves faster, it changes faster. And so the viruses with RNA in them are much harder to treat because as soon as we figure out how to treat them, they change. AIDS is an example of a virus that has RNA. So the HIV virus has RNA, and as soon as we figure out that this medication is going to work, the virus changes or mutates or evolves, and that medication doesn't work anymore. The same thing with the flu. That's why you have to get a flu vaccine every single year, because the flu has RNA in it, and it changes so fast. Okay? Chickenpox, on the other hand, has DNA. It's stable. It is changing, but not near as much, not near as fast. And so that's just something to think about with whether it has DNA or RNA, but not both. Okay, let's erase some of this. Around the virus is a capsid. Okay, so I'm going to draw my capsid here. There. And that capsid is made up of proteins. So you want to know that. For some reason, that's the number one missed question on the test. The capsid is made up of proteins. That's what the capsid is made of, proteins. And some viruses have an invisible envelope around them. And we'll do that in green. Okay, so if you look, some viruses, and they're kind of shaped funny, have an invisible cloak around them. And I call it an invisible cloak. It's really an envelope. But if you've seen Harry Potter or read the books, in the first book, Harry Potter gets that cloak that makes him invisible, and he can go anywhere and, do anything, and no one can see him because of his invisible cloak. Well, that's what that envelope does for viruses. That envelope is made up of, it tells you in your notes, it says the envelope usually consists of some combination of proteins, carbs, and lipids. Well, proteins, carbs, and phospholipids. Well, that's what your cell membrane is made up of. Your cell membrane is made up of proteins, carbohydrates, and it says lipids in your notes, but more likely phospholipids. And if you'll remember back to 202 with the immune system, your white blood cells, T cells and B cells both, have receptors. So your white blood cells have receptors around the outside of them. So their cell membrane is made up of receptors, and I call those receptors feelers. They feel, and they say, okay, this feels like us. This feels like your body's supposed to feel. This feels like your body's supposed to feel. Well, when it comes across a bacteria feels different because bacteria have peptidoglycan on their cell wall. And so it would kill the macrophage or whatever type of white blood cell it is, would engulf the bacteria. But the virus, if it has this envelope, that makes it feel like your cells. So that it's like it gives it a camouflage. It gives it a invisible cloak like Harry Potter. And so that allows the virus to get into your body, and then it can get into your cells without being identified by your immune system. And so it just takes a little bit longer for your immune system to overcome a virus. Okay, and then here's a picture. Let's make sure I got everything on that slide. Depending on the virus envelopes, they may or not be spiked. So you can kind of see in this next picture, the envelope is spiked. This is HIV. And like I said, HIV has RNA. So that red is RNA. And this is the capsid, the yellow. And then around in the green, so there's the capsid labeled. around in the green is the viral envelope. And that is, if you look closely, that is a phospholipid bilayer. So those are phospholipids right there. Phospholipids. And those are proteins and carbohydrates stuck together. And so it's almost like it's a cell membrane around the virus, but nobody calls that because viruses are acellular, remember. Okay, so this next slide tells us that viruses are specific, right? I said that. They're classified by their host. And so the viruses that infect us, and there's viruses that infect plants and different animals. Well, the only one you really need to know is the virus that infects a bacteria. So a bacteriophage is a virus. A virus, P-H-A-G-E, the suffix means virus. So a bacteriophage is a virus that infects a bacteria. And they normally, I always show this picture, they normally look like little spiders. Right that's a bacteriophage. And so bacteriophages look like that. And so that's a virus that infects a bacteria. Okay, so back to our original slide. We already said they're specific. They have one host. And in order to attach, so in order for the virus, let's say a bacteriophage, to attach to a bacteria, and I'm going to just put phage there. There's got to be the little feet of this virus must match up to the bacteria. So the virus has to be able to chemically react with the receptors on the surface. So the virus requirements for specific attachments are that the outer surface of the virus must chemically react with the receptor on the host, the red bacteria. For animal virus, the receptor sites are on the cell membrane. So your plasma membrane, your cell membrane. And remember, all cells have cell membranes. The host must have the factors the virus needs to multiply. So it must have, DNA here so that the virus can make more DNA. It has to have all the enzymes it needs to make new DNA. Okay, and this is the influenza virus. That's like the flu. And the flu also has RNA. Okay, and I really already said this. When a host is infected by a virus, the host immunity must produce antibodies, and antibodies are proteins made by the B cells, B white blood cells, and they react with the surface of, the bacteria or with the virus. And so, since we're talking about viruses, let's make this a virus. Let's try that again. Okay, so there's your virus. An antibody looks kind of like a Y. Like that. And it's going to the antibody is a protein. It's going to attach to the virus. And what it does is it deactivates it. We think it like kills it or, beats it up. No, it inactivates it. And so now the virus it's like a marker. Like it puts a flag in it. So now the antibody is attached. So either a macrophage will eat it or engulf it, or it can just go to the spleen where bad cells go to die. And so some viruses can escape the antibodies because they have an envelope, right? They have an envelope. Okay, the progeny or the copying of the mutated viruses can have altered surface proteins. They can change. They can evolve. And once they evolve, the antibodies are no good. We have to make new antibodies. And then the flu frequently undergoes such changes. And so that's why you have to get the vaccine every single year. And the vaccine, we talked about, it's a combobulation of different vaccines. When you get the flu vaccine, it's just a guess. It's what the strains that hit the last couple years, and the strains that hit in other countries that year, and the strains that the birds had, and the strains that the pigs had, and it's just a guess as to what's going to hit the human race. I know you've seen or read before, well, they'll say that the vaccine didn't work this year, and that's a scary thought because the older people and the younger people really need the flu vaccine. And so I hope this was helpful.